Alright, welcome back to Frieren, Anime Review, episode number 14. We're here reviewing the 29th episode of the series, known as Shall We Go Then? Covering chapters 61 and 62 of the manga. Yeah, that's one thing interesting about the first season of the show, is that it covered in 28 episodes, yes, 28, which I previously covered in the previous 13 episodes, episode 14. So, it covered 60 chapters and 28 episodes, which is not too bad. So, it's because of Frieren I had to change my methodology when it comes to when I watch shows that are that length. The seasons are like over a dozen episodes. Basically, if they're like about 2 dozen episodes, and about halfway through, I like to take I developed basically a new methodology where after about halfway the season of a 24 or 26 episodes, I basically push pause there like in the New Toku stuff, and then watch a quick 12 episode one and come back to that one to finish it up. That's basically how I do it. So, in the case of this particular episode, now of course I should mention that the last season aired back in 2023, roughly almost 3 years ago. They announced this like about a year after the conclusion of the previous season of the show. I, of course, watched the first season of the show last year. Yep, as a matter of fact, it was one of the first handful of shows I watched last year, and now basically here we are at the first episode. Now, initially this episode was supposed to come out last week. Apparently that was planned by Crunchyroll. And it wasn't just delayed because of sheer randomness. It was delayed because of basically snow in Texas. Yeah, because the fact snow was so bad in Texas that week, they decided to delay the release of this episode of about 1 week, and then as an apology for missing what was supposed to be episode 2 this week, they're having next week be a double feature. Which, of course, doing that with also Trigon Stargaze tomorrow. And also tomorrow, there is no new Case Closed. Yeah, for the next 2 weeks, there is no new Case Closed episodes because it's repeat. Yep, it's a repeat tomorrow. But in the case of this episode, we have Frieren, Stark, and Fern, where they're just... they do a bunch of stuff here, like you have Stark going fishing a couple times in the episode, once he catches a small fish, got her food, and... Though, one thing I noticed, though, compared to the first season, which the animation is fantastic, this one, yes, it's still Madhouse. I kind of felt as though with this one, it felt a bit lighter in the animation colors than it was the previous season's show. I have no idea why in the world this happened. Because the first season, I get the reason why people love the first season of this one. Yes, because the animation looked gorgeous. Here, still looks good. I kind of felt as though basically with this the way the animation looked in this episode compared to the previous season show, is that it took a tiny bit of a dip. Yeah, it didn't look as bright as it once was. Still got good colors in it. It's just that it took a slight dip, despite the fact that, it's not the design of the characters that took a dip. That's not the issue. It's just the colors, the way it looked color-wise, it looked like it was a bit of a step down from the last season of the show. Because I had not heard anything about the season per se, like how it's doing, what the reception is, because I've been hearing a lot of complaints about the One Punch Man animation. But this is basically made by Madhouse, a very popular studio that people are still mad at, basically, One Punch Man for basically deciding to pass season 2. And I pointed out, multiple times when it comes to that show, that you could say, yeah, they turned it down, and people were like, then why switch studios? Probably the committee behind the show wanted to switch studios, probably because maybe Madhouse too expensive for them. It's possible. That or... And this is my personal guess. What happened, the reason why I switched AC staff is probably because they probably made the committee a better offer than Madhouse did. That's probably what happened with that one. This one, not sure what happened, but so goes fishing, gathers food. Also, once again, now Now, of course, yes, you still have the same. Now, one thing I appreciate about this episode is that the voice cast stayed the same. There were no changes. You still have the awesome Mallory Roddick, who voices Frieren, Jill Harris, who does Fern. I think Stark pretty much kept the same person. Of course, they have flashbacks to Heroes Party, who appear at least a couple times this episode, because most of them running from a dragon. And pretty much everybody there kept the same voice cast. Heck, this few character probably later on. And if I could tell, still the same voice cast, so there's no really much change with that. And Mallory, of course, we're definitely on point with this thing. Of course, since the first season aired, since I watched the first season, I have met Mallory. And I took a picture with her. This is actually what was at Tampa Comic-Con last year. And I'm going to see her again next month at Make Orlando, which I'm looking forward to that. I hope she doesn't cancel, because there was a thing about several years ago, we have voice actors up and cancel because of reasons. So, most points like got the herbs. Also, you have Frieren just getting up early to find this mysterious stone, which turns to be a magic nullifier stone, which Fern can't use it to light a fire. And, of course, then they go walking later on. Well, actually, they ride a wagon, and then, they're like, oh yeah, great mages. Now, of course, that I do appreciate the fact that they keep some continuity here the previous season, of the reason why Stark was recruited to the team, because they needed a warrior. He's technically the only person on the team who's not magic. So, there's that. And because he's someone strong, and of course mention how much of a coward he is, which they keep the previous season, which is good on them for doing that. You could say that's, it's like the manga, which is definitely true. But if you're just an anime-only watcher, you're like, good on basically for the animators, well, he's probably the dubbers, for keeping the continuity from the previous season about Stark's character. Which, good on them for doing that. And they use some walking later. And then, of course, Frieren notices, this ground is not stable, and then the three of them fall through a freaking cave. And, of course, Fern basically has to be the one who basically catches Stark, because, of course, they're dating. And it's like, and then the magic fails, and then Stark falls on the ground first, belly first, and then his girlfriend falls on top of him, and the girlfriend's master, her basically her mistress. And she's like, can you two get off me? I'm sure he probably doesn't have a problem with Fern being on top of him. He probably doesn't like the fact that, Frieren's on it. Now, they also call back to another thing from the previous season of the show, with Stark calling Frieren an old hag. Despite the fact she's an elf and she's gorgeous. Yeah. And of course, they go to the cave for a while. They can't use the magic to mine this stuff. He even tried his axe, and it does nothing. And then they come across a monster, and of course, this is where they have the Hero flashback, where I think it's the preacher, the one who Frieren calls him like a closeted pervert, I think it was, where he ends up carrying the dwarf of the team, and of course you have Himmel carrying Frieren, because it was very, very much hinted the fact that he had feelings for her, and he also had a strong desire to have children with her. Yes, he did. It's mentioned that in the anime too. So, and here you have Stark running from the monster, having his girlfriend over his shoulder, and carrying the mistress by her collar. And of course they run out, and then they go to a town. But by the way, they also make a brief stop, we had passed this, but took over the hot springs. And then of course you have gathering stuff. So he comes back early from gathering herbs. He figures, I'll use this time to go fishing, and then he comes across Fern and Frieren bathing. Now you're probably thinking, are these two butt naked? No, they're not. They are not naked. They are well covered, and he does apologize. Now, And of course, they do in fact have a slight wording change in the manga where Frieren calls him, and in the manga, she calls him a perv. In the anime, she calls him a pervert. He does, of course, they do also have another slight change here of him bowing to him while apologizing. In the manga, he is just on his knees apologizing. And of course, basically, they do his apology. There's a funny bit where Frieren just poofs out Frieren's hair, which was so funny. And then not long after this, they go to a pub and they run to the three mages from the last season, had the last arc, the episode of the season, where they're not kind of an official party. Stark is once again offered to join them. He declines. He does join them for a drink. He does not join the party for like an adventure because basically, well, he does point out though that, well, Frieren puts up with his cowardly butt. And basically that she's also kind of the reason why. And we also, and the thing is, they start dating toward the end of the previous season of the show, and it's like since then, there's also one point that she wanted to pat him on the head, and he gets spooked by it. I'm like, dude, you're in love with this woman who half the time can't emit emotion. Because that's apparently how the whole thing is with the whole thing of being Fern. It's like it's like being stoic, whatever. At least Frieren emits a lot of emotions by being an elf. Because there are times, elves half the time are very grumpy and very much like, a lot of them tend to be very dicks to people. Because, and this is even common the case with the American version, actually it's more like British basically with Lord of the Rings, where elves are kind of depicted very similar to a lot of depictions. I mean, some are not evil, like in the case of Backstab Backwater Dungeon. Some are just basically just, you are beneath me because I'm older than you and I know better. Yes, that is a common characteristic with a lot of elves that I've seen in animation and also in live action. With the exception of the Santa Claus stuff, so... Excuse me. And then, of course, basically, that they go on the next town, and that's the episode of that show. Overall, really good. And, well, and it was announced early on. I knew about this. And, of course, I keep seeing Instagram. It keeps reminding me, oh, yeah, this season was confirmed to be only... Apologies about that. That this season was confirmed to be 10 episodes. Which I'm like, wow, that's it's quite short. I'm surprised no one's whining complaining about this compared to Fire Force. Well, that was confirmed to be 13 episodes. People complain about that, but don't complain about Frieren being 10 episodes, given the fact the previous season was only 28. Yeah, 28 episodes. So by the time the season ends, they'll be up to 38. And I have pretty much caught up with the manga once again. Yes. Where I have pretty much read until like chapter, I think it was like 147, I think it was. Yeah, 147. That is the most recent chapter I read. I don't know of any more release. I think the manga's on hiatus again. I think it is. I think so. Don't quote me on that. But I covered the manga once again because I did read until originally where the anime left off the first season. And eventually I did just read the whole thing. And I pretty much have covered the manga right now. Yeah, it's all cut up. Yep. And some might be asking, am I planning on reviewing new chapters of the manga with the season? No. I have no plans for that at all. I plan to just read it when it ever comes out. There's some I do read it with the anime, review with the anime, but not all of them. The other ones, as of currently, I do have 4 is One Piece. I was doing for Boruto, but because I do a stream with Jay Heat, I don't do that anymore. I will review when the anime returns. I will be reviewing that. I do it for Black Clover. Let's see. I do it for One Punch Man. And I did it for My Hero Academia when the manga was coming out. I did do that. I did. I'm trying to think. I think that's it. Oh, Case Closed. That's another one. I do, in fact, review the manga with that one, too. Anime manga, the same episode. So, not many of them per se, but a good chunk of them. But at least a small amount of them per se. Yep. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications. Next up we have is Metal Heroes. Discussing a few more episodes of Jampers. Okay, next video. Bye.